I will be breezing through Exhibit A, which is this report over 200 pages, which was prepared by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, released last fall, so it's very current. Brief background is that it was requested by the DOE Office of Wind and Hydropower Technologies, and it was also with 15 contributing authors, as well as outside external peer reviewers, including some Europeans. It is based on the 20% wind report, for those of you that know about that report, which was released in 2008. It was the first time that the United States had done a study of significant integration of land-based and offshore wind in the nation. And it was very well received throughout various different parties, including the conventional generation. And what it showed is that 54 gigawatts of offshore would be feasible in this particular scenario. And so that generated more discussions about if that's that much wind available offshore, we better start thinking about it. And that was before the rules for offshore wind were promulgated, which I'll get into briefly. Offshore wind looks expensive, and that's been part of the criticism. However, in the Northeast, in some of the Atlantic Canadian provinces, rates are not so inexpensive. And so what we started to analyze, well, if rates were, retail rates were at 9 or even above, sometimes 14, 15 cents per kilowatt hour, now we're talking about a region which could look at offshore wind as an option. The industry overview, this is outdated already. This was in the report. There's more gigawatts now and more projects in Europe. But you can see where the main developments have been. Denmark has been the pioneer in Europe. The UK has a tremendous surge of industrial development in the offshore wind area. They have 7 projects under construction right now. They are very aggressive in pushing forward with offshore wind. And the newest member of the team on going into offshore wind is China. They will be moving out, of course, at gigawatt scale. One thing we learned from the Chinese is that their demonstrations are our utility scale. So they're going to be moving rapidly and become a leader in several years. In the U.S., we've seen a mixed bag. This is in the report. It's also been updated. Unfortunately, one of the New York projects has been on hold. Other things have happened. I won't go into all that. It's all on the web and in the news. But the bottom line is there's activity, and it's no coincidence that most of it is up in the Northeast. Again, getting back to the rates and the options available to the Northeast for renewable energy is very limited on a utility scale. Offshore wind, the resources, I won't go into this in very much detail, just to say we're not resource limited. The red, this is just one state to show how they indicate the level of the resource. Is a very good resource. It's comparable and even superior to some of the European resources that we're looking at. And again, you can see why the Northeast is one of the key regions going forward. The cost of energy, obviously, is a very important piece of this puzzle. We obviously hear a lot of feedback on the fact that offshore wind is too expensive, and our question back to them is expensive compared to what? So I encourage those of you that think it's expensive to begin to look at the facts and look at the figures, which are not readily apparent. Walt and his team have put this together to show installed costs for operating European projects, which you can see is over through 2010. Announced costs for proposed U.S. projects are the green, and then announced projects are the yellow. You see some coming down of the costs here, and particularly as we go out beyond 2010. These were the early projects in Europe, and there's obviously reasons why early projects are the most expensive. Those costs are coming down, and I would encourage folks that are seriously interested to look at this. One of the reasons related to cost issues are that we don't have the infrastructure to support offshore wind industry, except some of our old ports, the shipbuilding capabilities, both in Atlantic Canada as well as in the Northeast and in the Gulf area, have not been sustained over time because of those decline of the industry. So what the question is, who rebuilds the infrastructure? This is an argument we've heard a lot about, even most recently in the U.S. because of our budget challenges and the fact that this would create jobs and a new industry, and we've seen this happen in Europe. This is another very important thing to look at, but it's not always as apparent just to look at the capacity contracted price and the cents per kilowatt hour. You could see the wide variety here between the three power purchase agreements that have been finalized in these states. There's many packages, as Walt and I have here. You really have to look at the fine print of these power purchase agreements. Again, they're new, so there's a lot of details to understand. Of course, policy and financial subsidies are a critical piece of this puzzle, as they are with all energy sources. So what's the argument? I'm not going to read all these, but obviously there are very important reasons to look seriously at utility-scale renewable options. Offshore wind is one of the only ones that is available and commercial and can be deployed quickly, which sometimes we forget about, that even though there is a long-term permitting issue, it can be deployed quickly. It can address those of us that are concerned about CO2 reductions and climate change emissions. So what's the message is that the process that we take to undergo these changes are very important. Stakeholders, this is a marine spatial planning map that's going on in the United States right now. This is never before seen map, which I got from AWS True Power. It's a brand new resource map of the Atlantic Maritimes. It has not been validated, I'd like to say that, but it is an excellent view of what the resource is in the Atlantic Maritimes, and you can see this is the higher average wind speed, which is in the 8 to 9 meters per second. At 80 meters, and you can see it's tremendous. There is not an issue in terms of resource potential. So how do we deal with all these issues? The public concerns, we have the resource and we have the ability to do it, but we must deal with some of these issues of public trust issues, the equity issues of the people that are sited near wind, etc. And what can we do today? And now wrap it up with this, which is to really commit to sustained public involvement. Unless you involve the communities that are going to be part of the siting, this will never succeed. So early on, government agencies need to identify the stakeholders and work with them in a very, not just hold public hearings, but hear people and incorporate these ideas into their policies. And then you could also call for comparative life cycle assessments that really look at the different energy sources, both fossil and renewable, and compare those risks and benefits to try and qualify what we have in front of us as an option, and to remember there are no fuel costs with wind. And the main message I'll conclude with is don't miss the opportunity. These are new numbers which I got off the web yesterday, actually, trying to be more current, and the number of megawatts installed, and you can see clearly the U.S. number is 0. So with that, I'll just say don't miss the boat and try and review what the options are and cost and benefits.